Hello, my name is Eliz Ayaydin, and I will be presenting my thesis titled, I Was There When.
I saw a field of debris wash up on my street.
I remember there was so much debris just flying around in my face.
The power had been out for hours.
I had a black eye, but right then, I was numb and just trying to stay alive.
I later found out my lip was split open, practically
The
up
wind
to my
rose
nose.
and the tree fell into the house.
And then I spent the night on my neighbor's roof.
When she told me this, all I could think was,
I
oh
saw
my God, is it
a
real?
refrigerator just pass by, and then I turned around.
It
There
was
were
just a
people.
bunch of mud and tears.
It took a while for me to feel grateful that I'm alive,
I lost my home
but I got
and
there.
everything inside it,
Stuff is just stuff.
including all of my photos.
There was so much generosity and kindness.
It's amazing how such a sad and hopeless time created a story of survival.
If I had to do it
If I
again.
had to do it
If I had
again.
to do it
again, I couldn't do it again.
The phrases you hear in the film are actual quotes from Hurricane Sandy survivors. While Sandy is close to home, people have these same experiences from disasters across the globe. The Earth kills 106,000 people per year, on average. This is a huge loss, but it only begins to reflect the magnitude of destruction on the mental well-being of those who survive. 30 to 40% of disaster survivors experience stress, anxiety, and depression symptoms. There's a crucial period of time after a disaster where people are especially sensitive. And this is also the time when the community volunteers and relief organizations start to leave the disaster site. Nasreen Mohi, one of the many volunteers that spoke about this key period of time, explained that people assume the communities are bouncing back, but they're not, and that the survivors feel a sense of abandonment. When trauma symptoms are not treated, some people fall through the cracks and develop post-traumatic stress disorder. So living in a time where we're increasingly turning to empowerment for problem solving, can we give people the agency to successfully cope with their traumatic experiences? Having always been deeply interested in behavioral psychology and well-being, I'm motivated to help those in need crack this nut. And when I turned to my research, I learned that the need is real. I spoke with neurologists, psychologists, researchers, professors, people that have experiences around memory disorders, and designers. I also talked to disaster survivors and volunteers and experts in relief organizations who work with disaster recovery every day. One key principle came from a documentary about music's capacity to combat memory loss in Alzheimer's patients. It quotes, "Medicine can dim the light inside, but it can't bring any of it out." This inspired me to incorporate the power of non-medical interventions into my work. One significant conversation was with Barry Kosofsky, chief neurologist at Weill Cornell Medical Center. He explained that his recent studies show extinction is not erasing old memory, but rather placing down a new one, and that this has tremendous implications for how we should treat people suffering from PTSD. This research pushed the conversation about my thesis from memory to traumatic memories and led to an insight that reveals something innate to humans. We're always trying to remember, and we forget to forget. Well, it turns out that in order to heal, we must forget, and in order to forget, we must remember. Mapping out the journey of overcoming trauma quickly revealed this key part of the healing process, reflecting and reliving as a method of coping. In addition to this, post-traumatic stress has the potential to transform into post-traumatic growth, which is when people experience a trauma that changes their worldviews and self-identities in a way that provokes positive personal growth. Essentially, a traumatic event can be used as a springboard to unleash our best qualities and lead happier lives. Interestingly, the top 5 traits of post-traumatic growth are the direct opposite of the top 5 regrets of people on their deathbeds. This means that somehow a traumatic event can unlock our ability to lead a life with fewer regrets. It's scientifically proven that people can increase their ability to experience post-traumatic growth by boosting 4 types of resilience: emotional, physical, mental, and social resilience, which is what I'll be focusing on. And bringing this closer to natural disasters, a longitudinal study on post-traumatic growth called Resilience in Survivors of Katrina revealed findings that people tend to feel a greater sense of purpose as a result of strong social support. leveraging the power of social problem solving and resilience building in combination with healing by re-experiencing a traumatic event, I developed the service Present Tense, a real-time disaster story-sharing platform. Using information and filters about your neighborhood, disaster type, and beliefs, people can talk about and hear about others' disasters experiences and connect with those that they can relate to. In addition to social sharing for healing, the platform is a place to deposit your memories, creating an archive of recordings and journal entries for you to reflect on. These entries can be kept to yourself, shared with the public, friend circles, or with a volunteer mental health worker who would provide instant support while having a holistic overview of your archived healing journey. Having initially designed a physical service, a mental relief kit that takes into account the fact that people won't have phones, internet, or power right after a disaster strikes, I moved past designing for immediate response when physical needs are primary, and position Present Tense as long-term mental relief solution in the post-disaster emotional journey. By harnessing the power of crowdsourcing and receiving funding from relief organizations, Present Tense will begin with one community's disaster and expand into a nationwide network. So I decided to test how effective sharing experiences a couple weeks after a disaster can be. On March 26, New York experienced a smaller scale disaster, closer to home. An explosion in the East Village left a block up in flames, injuring 19, killing 2, and shocking the region. A few weeks after, I posted a board across the street from the scene that invited people in the neighborhood to share their stories, general uplifting memories about the neighborhood, or stories from the explosion itself. The piece prompts people to fill in the blank, I remember, and it became a channel for starting conversations. One woman pointed across the street to the building facing towards the empty block and said, "You see the third floor window there? That's my apartment. I still haven't been able to move back in." We took a moment to reflect. For part of the day, I took a seat at a nearby stoop close enough to see and hear what was going on, but far enough that no one would suspect that I was associated with the project. My absence gave passerbys the permission to take time to view and add to the board without feeling pressured or judged. What I observed was that people really spent time reflecting, reading and adding to the board, and turning around to acknowledge the vacant block where the exploded apartments, restaurants, and businesses used to be. Some of the memories were about the day of the explosion, like, I remember getting on scene and having an immediate urge to help. Sad day. While others were about the lost businesses and restaurants that they miss. Like, I remember my first date with my fiance at Sushi Park. Best first date ever. This experience showed me that yes, reflecting, supporting, sharing experiences, and hearing other people's is a way of mending pain and uplifting communities. And it was these moments, actually talking and testing with people, that revealed the most insightful findings throughout my exploration. I had an opportunity to hear from a diverse group of disaster survivors and volunteers during a co-creative workshop that I designed and hosted. The most intriguing thing I learned was very few saw value in painful memories shaping their identities, and most would ideally like to forget them forever. So I wondered, could I design an object, a ritual, a behavior to help trauma sufferers forget these memories that they so badly want to erase from their lives? Contemplating the future of healing, I explored ways that I could recontextualize behavioral therapy methods into self-help tools. Currently, therapists desensitize patients' responses to memories using behavioral modification techniques based on classical conditioning theory, which is when you learn a new behavior via the process of association. Essentially, two stimuli are linked together to produce a new learned response. I designed a device based on this foundation in the field of psychology by productizing behavioral conditioning so that survivors can create new emotional associations independently without a therapist. Using scent as the stimulus, the device leverages the fact that smell is the most powerful sense to evoke memories. While a survivor talks about their experience, their stress levels are detected using a heart pulse sensor. By training the person to associate particular scents with specific levels of stress, and intentionally changing those stimuli at appropriate times, the device will help the person to relearn their traumatic memories with new reactions. So when the user is highly stressed, the scent they've learned to associate with low stress is emitted, rewiring their brain to associate the most traumatic moments of their memory with calm physiological reactions.
It was intense, but I didn't think much of it. I mean, I don't know, I wasn't behind the wheel, so that could have been why. The sky was crazy. It looked like it was the middle of the night at noon. A big branch swept across the windshield and my mom screamed. It hit me then that this was serious. Suddenly, I heard the loudest noise. It was painfully loud, louder than anything I've ever heard. I just about jumped out of the car seat. About 20 feet ahead, a huge tree had fallen right into the road, crushing a blue car underneath it.
So through all this, I pulled the pieces together and made an interesting discovery. Regardless of the scientifically proven theories or tested methods of coping, a person's life values, religious beliefs, spirituality, whatever it is that they live by, have the biggest impact in how they will heal. I heard it on the streets of New York City unprompted. A gentleman approached me explaining that there's no such thing as a natural disaster, and that Jesus created it because of the sins that people have committed. I heard it during user tests. A classmate that survived a major earthquake in Istanbul said his country healed through the help of religious leaders. I heard it during the workshop. A Katrina survivor said his experience was so destructive, but he wouldn't have it any other way, because the pain is what has shaped the person he is today. I heard it from all these people in all these different contexts, and each of them offered a unique interpretation and perspective. Everyone was there when something happened. He was there when. They were there when. You were there when something potentially traumatic and certainly impactful to your life happened, and you have a story too. What I thought was so objective, figuring out the optimal solution for mental relief, turns out to be entirely subjective. Having learned this, I leave you with I was there when. An exploration to get us one step closer to understand how people can cope with trauma through a set of concepts, artifacts, experiences, and ideas that I passionately studied and carefully crafted in a way that each individual trauma sufferer can apply to their lives in their own unique ways. Thank you to everyone this year for supporting me, to Alan, to faculty, to my classmates, family, friends, and for all of you today here today.
That was just unbelievably comprehensive. It's an incredible timing about the explosion on the Lower East Side and your thesis. We wouldn't wish for it, but it was incredible that you were able to leverage that, to learn some things. I like that you had said that you were on the stoop nearby, not sort of influencing, but close enough to hear. What was the energy like when people were filling this in?
Yeah, so I started off the day actually prompting people to participate, thinking that maybe they wouldn't notice the board posted. And I found that people were much more likely to just walk by and kind of felt like I was pressuring them to participate. So then when I took a seat at the stoop, it was really clear that people felt more comfortable taking time. And I guess one of the most surprising things was how long people took, and also how long they took to look at the disaster after and really soak it in. And if they were with a loved one, they would hold each other. So it was definitely really eye-opening and a great choice for me to kind of step away and give them the permission to look at this on their own. So
yeah, and I'm wondering, I mean, at a certain point there would be a critical mass of statements. Did people spend a lot of time reading or writing or sort of pondering?
I would say most people read. So I put lines intentionally to prompt people to,
Smart.
Yeah. So most people would read the board, and then some that would feel compelled to add to it would add to it. But I'd say that just by a lot of people walked by, and so some of them would write on it, and then by the end of the day, it was completely filled. So it was a good balance, I guess.
I love how multidimensional this project is. It touches sort of so many products of design. And I'm also really excited about your statements at the end where you talk about trying to create some sort of design solution that's objective, and then realizing that ultimately this is objective, and realizing that ultimately this is almost entirely subjective. How do you make sense of that as a design person moving forward?
Well, I think one of the things that I learned through this design program is that designers give people the access to products, services, and so I think that really goes with what I was trying to accomplish, and everyone will use these different tools and use these different methods of coping, but ultimately they're all going to use them in different ways. So as long as we're giving them the access to the resources, then they can figure it out on their own to some extent based on where they're coming from and their innate beliefs, personalities.
What they bring to it.
Yeah.
I recently read an article about, or saw this video about virtual reality and exposure therapy. And so you're familiar with some of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I think the interesting thing about the virtual reality exposure therapy is that it's very dependent on the visual cues. So it's getting people into a scene that they had a traumatic experience with, and using visual cues as well as sounds. So let's say, like, for example, a trip to the airport, they would be experiencing this in
like a fear of flying kind of
thing? Or a
thing?
fear of flying, exactly, a fear of flying. And I actually think that incorporating more senses into that type of therapy would be really effective. So for example, using the virtual reality therapy with also the more visceral scent cues could be like a very effective method of coping. And also it's a good push towards self-help tools. And like as of now, the therapist is administering this type of therapy, but it would be really revolutionary if people could use this on their own. And I think that is in the near future.
Well, maybe you can help them get there.
Maybe.
Thank you, Eliz.
Thank you.